You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. So the Sox in the Basement podcast was in the can, as they say. It was completed. Steve Parazinski going to be on the show. He writes for Sox in the Basement at soxinthebasement.com. He also writes for other publications talking about the White Sox. He's been critical of the White Sox, but we talk some winter meetings, what they should do, what they have done, what they're going to do, should we panic, all that stuff. And Dave's here as well. But all that was done, and then late at night, Tuesday night, the Chicago White Sox go out and make a deal with the Rangers. They get Nomar Mazara, corner outfielder, but in reality, that's your right fielder, at least for now. And they trade Steele Walker, one of their prospects. Mazara, 4 years in the majors, came up when he was 21 years old, and in those 4 years, these statistics are basically exactly the same across the board. The man gets after some right-handed pitching, sucks against some left-handed pitching. He's like an 800 OPS against righties. He's like a 6-something OPS against lefties. He hits about 20 home runs a year. He hits like 260, maybe 250, depending on how many, lefties and righties he faces. He was platooned last year by the Rangers because they decided he was never going to hit left-handed pitching. There's still a lot of control on him, and he's still young. What did the White Sox give up? They give up a guy in Steele Walker that was like number 6 on the MLB pipeline list of White Sox prospects. But remember, we've been bringing guys up. He would have been further down just last year or the year before that. And 8 on, I believe, the Baseball America list. So he's a guy in the top 10 of White Sox prospects, at least at this point. And some of these lists are going to get updated before the end of the season. He had a terrible run at the beginning of his minor league career and then found something in low A ball. And then when he went to high A, he had some problems pop up. Guess what his problem is? He doesn't do very well against left-handed pitching. He's actually pretty much Nomar Mazara, except Nomar Mazara is in the majors, and he's been there for 4 years, and Steele Walker's still in A ball, and he's having his struggles. So I think you got to put that a little bit in perspective. If somebody sat there and said you can have a guy that's actually completed all those steps and done well enough to make it to the majors, or you can have a guy that's in single A where you're going to have this decrease in ability. If you couldn't bring up Steele Walker right now, but you want a guy like that now. You want to advance Steele Walker. It's like sitting there and saying, well, we got Steele Walker, we got this other guy, they're pretty much the same thing. We just kind of want to advance that timetable a couple of years and get that guy, that type of player out there right now. Then you would sit there and say, okay, the deal makes sense. I think the reason that White Sox fans are split, and it's very obvious, some people see this as, hey, I'm okay with this deal. Some people are, they can't figure it out yet. And some people are really, really angry about it, is because you wanted the White Sox to go out and get Marcell Ozuna. You wanted the White Sox to go out and get Nick Castellanos. You're like, why are we not spending any money? Why are we getting Nomar Mazara? Well, if it's a depth move, it's a great move. If it's we just want to go out and get this guy and see what he can turn into, and we're not going to be using him all the time, and he's not going to be out there every day, but we just needed another outfielder, because remember, rosters expand to 26 players. They may sit there and say, we're going to have him out there in the outfield mix. You don't know what their plan is. If that's the plan, this isn't a bad move. It's a nice little move. It's not the big move you were expecting, but it's a nice little move. If in January they trot out Grandal, mention the Abreu re-signing, and say Mazara, and that's it at Sox Fest, you're going to have some angry people. And I completely understand that. I'll be standing right next to you. But in the middle of December, I'm not sure if I'm going to get upset about this yet. Like, I look at this as incomplete grade. There's an incomplete grade on this deal because he's got a great fielding percentage. I mean, he's a 995 fielding percentage. He had 1 error last year. He basically saves you 5 runs a season. So he's a defender that contributes to you instead of being a detriment to you. He's got some power, and he has a lot of potential still because he's 24 years old. He's a low-risk, high-reward player. If he doesn't pan out, It didn't really cost you that much. I don't think Steele Walker is that big of a price. I could be wrong, but prospects are still prospects. I don't think it's a big price. But if the plan is, well, he's going to be our right fielder for the next 3 years, and we're just going to sit there and stick with it because we're being cheap, I totally understand why people are upset. I don't know if I believe that's what actually happened here. I have told myself I'm going to get through the offseason and look at it as a whole before I just start screaming and yelling and pulling my hair out. So the jury is out on this move. At face value, what you gave up for what you acquired, I still think you ended up with more than what you gave away. In a vacuum, I think it's a good deal. In the we want to start competing and not rebuilding frame, though, it's frightening if that's the move, because there were a lot of options out there, and you better hope Nick Hostetler, moving over from amateur scouting to pro scouting, saw something amazing, and the White Sox are like, oh yeah, this is how we're going to fix him. Because if they can do it, it's an amazing deal. But this could be all this guy is. There's a good chance after 4 years, and those numbers don't change very much offensively over those 4 years, they're pretty much stagnant, that this is what he is. But a lot of guys, the switch goes on at 25 or 26, and maybe that's what the White Sox think is going to happen. We have a lot of show ahead. We are not spending this entire thing on Nomar Mazara, so let's talk more winter meetings. And remember, you can give us your thoughts on Mazara and the deal anytime you want to. Give us a call, 708-459-8406, 708-459-8406. Sox in the Basement continues now. Rick Hahn came out on Monday night, and I want to talk about what he said. He gets out there with all the Chicago reporters in a circle on a patio outside of the hotel in San Diego, and there's some video of this floating around, and all the beat reporters hear the same words that come out of his mouth. And then they all say something different.
Well, yeah, because it's telephone game.
No. But they all watched it actually being said from him, but the interpretations are amazing. Like, for example, the Sun-Times article that comes out first, the headline and the article suggests that the White Sox aren't trying that hard this year. White Sox big push might be a year away. The majority of the article... I
did read that headline, yeah.
And the majority of the article is not Rick Hahn's quotes. It's a scout talking about what they think the White Sox should do and will do. But it's not Rick Hahn's quotes. No. Meanwhile, The Athletic comes out with an article the next morning on Tuesday morning. And in that article, it explains a little bit better that the Sox are still looking to fill the holes that they said at the beginning. They still need to go get that right fielder. They're still going to add a couple of pitchers. But there's no reason for Rick Hahn to make a deal today because it's still a long offseason and there's a lot of options. Those are two very different ways to look at what's going on right now.
My reaction to it was neutral. When I read it, I'm sitting there going, well, I mean, okay, that makes sense. You don't necessarily have to sign anybody right now. Does that mean that the Sox aren't working on still signing Castellanos or a Mad Bum or, insert your favorite starting pitcher here? No, it doesn't mean they're not doing that at all. But the one thing that I had noticed, the type of players that the White Sox want, at least thus far, we're talking about right fielders who can hit, and starting pitchers, one at the front end, one at the back end. These are not guys who are not necessarily flying off the shelves that you're going to have to get into a bidding war for. The Sox are not interested in the Cole thing. They were never interested in Strasburg. I've not heard them interested in Ryu yet, even though I think they should be, but you haven't heard those two connected. So the type of players that the Sox want and ultimately need are not the ones that you have to go out and get right here, right now. So, I mean, I read it. I was like, well, stinks. I would have liked to have come down here and talked about a Marcell Ozuna signing today. But, whatever. There's time.
I think that the White Sox had a plan that they had written down with a list. It was Yasmani Grandal. The next one was Zach Wheeler. And they had every intention of doing anything within their power to beating everybody out for them. and I think are a little shell-shocked that they didn't get Wheeler. I mean, that was a lot of money. They went well over what the initial estimates were. They offered $120 million to the guy and more years than that they're normally comfortable with to give to him. I mean, that's the thing. They offered Zach Wheeler a deal that most White Sox fans would have said, like, nope, they would never do that. And they did it, and they lost out. So now they're sitting there and they're saying, okay, fine, now it's time to move on to the next thing. And the next thing may not be exactly what you thought it was. Like, look, you and I like Madison Bumgarner. I'm sure, I mean, there's been reports they've talked to Bumgarner.
Yes.
But now they're not really on the tip of everybody's tongue at the winter meetings as one of the teams that are in on him. I'm fine with that. They've made contact. They've probably said, don't sign without talking to us. And now they've disappeared because I think that's how they're playing things. I think they've made contacts with all of these camps. I mean, between your Bumgarner and your Ryu and your Keuchel, which are really the next tier, and then it completely falls off. But those are the guys, there's no reason for them to get into this because guess what happened? The moment the White Sox got connected to Wheeler and became the front runner essentially for several days, what happened? A team that nobody had mentioned came in and grabbed him.
Right.
And what did the White Sox do to get Grandal? Nobody was really talking about the White Sox. White Sox walked in and grabbed them. The White Sox are sitting there saying, we don't want to be connected to anybody. They're not going to say a word. Rick Hahn, and you know what? Good for them. We said we wanted them to shut up and do their business behind closed doors, and they're doing it, so I'm happy.
Let me ask you this, and this is just an honest question. Why the urgency, in your opinion, why the urgency to try to get a Zach Wheeler contract done before Thanksgiving or before winter meetings, but then when that doesn't happen, to bide their time with all of the other pitchers that are right there with him on that tier? Like, I'm not really following why it was such a rush to try to sign that particular dude right off the get, but then not have. So when Zach Wheeler turns you down, you don't go to the plan B right away.
I think the White Sox and most of baseball looked at this offseason and thought that the pace of things was not going to be as quick in the starting pitching market as it ended up being. I think the Sox looked at it and said, okay, everybody's going to go look on Cole. Everybody's going to go look on Strasburg. Everybody's going to be sitting around trying to kick the tires. We're going to strike quick on Grandal, and then we're going to try to strike quick on Wheeler. And the unfortunate thing that happened is that Wheeler's agent was smart enough to realize, oh, my guy's popular. And he made sure he put it out there, and he made sure other teams knew, hey, this move is going to happen soon. Get your offers together. And those teams that weren't ready to make their offers together then jumped in. And now think about it this way. You want to achieve surprise, like a sneak attack. And the White Sox were able to successfully do it with Grandal, and then they tried to do it with Wheeler, and now the surprise aspect is gone. Everybody knows they're a player, and everybody knows what they're looking for. And so now, anybody that they go and they talk to, if they start to get really intense and they're the first team to jump in on them, somebody else is going to sit there and say, let the White Sox set the price, and then we'll figure out if we can beat it at the end. And they don't want to be that. So now they have to take a step back, and they have to say, okay, we may be interested in these other guys, but I think they looked at Zach Wheeler, one, as we can go after and grab him quick, and we could shock the world that doesn't think that he's even worth $100 million, and we're going to go in. We know that our ceiling is up at about $120 million, and we're going to go beat everybody to him. And when it didn't work, now they realize, like Madison Bumgarner's out there saying it starts at $100 million. Well, the Sox might value him right at that at this point.
Right.
And they might be like, there's no shock and awe isn't going to work with that. And so it makes sense to kind of sit back now and see what is the market, because the market is very different. You see these high pitching prices, they kind of have to reevaluate what they're doing and how they're going to attack things. I don't think they're done. I think they have targets that they're going to go get, but the landscape changed drastically over the last couple of weeks. Hey, thanks for listening. If you're into podcasts and you like beer, craft beer reviews, craft brewery tours, fatherhood, drunken singing, outrageousness, late 1990s morning radio, trapped 20 years later at a 9-foot homemade oak bar, the original Broadcast Basement podcast is still available everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at broadcastbasement.com. And it is still 30 minutes of good in a world of dumb, with a new on-demand episode every Thursday. Maybe listen to it after this show, which continues now. Steve Paradzinski's on the line. You can follow him on Twitter. He's a big guy on White Sox Twitter. You can either look up Southside Clown Show or at NWI Steve. He writes for lots of different publications, including Sox in the Basement. This is the first time we've had you on since you started writing for the website, bud.
Yeah, hey, Chris. Thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a lot of fun here, these first couple of articles that I've been able to put out for you guys.
Well, I was worried. I didn't know what your sensibilities would be on the last article with the pictures that I selected, but it seems as though you and I were on the same page.
Yeah, no, it was all good, my man. It fit in perfectly for the picture that I was trying to paint. Hopefully something good happens here in these next couple of days and we have something to talk about.
Well, here's the thing. First off, a lot of baseball teams, they've complained. I've read recent articles on this and I've heard this complaint before that it's hard to get deals done actually during the meetings because you need to have roster flexibility with your 40-man roster. And some of these teams are sitting around going, well, I want to use a few picks in the Rule 5 draft at the end of the meetings. And so they don't feel like they have the flexibility and they're a little bit nervous to make a move, and you get more moves that get announced after the Rule 5 draft is over, even though they got worked out at the winter meetings. And so I keep wondering if, the Sox are sitting around and they may have a partner or they may make a deal, because I think that they're in that position where they're going to make a surprise trade. They're either going to pick up a pitcher with a trade because they missed out on Wheeler, or they're going to go out and get a right fielder with a trade. But I feel like a deal is imminent with this team. They're not getting through the offseason without making some sort of a deal, because I don't think they're happy with what's left in free agency. When they started, I think they had a very different plan.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment about a potential trade coming here soon, especially after having missed out on Zach Wheeler last week. They have to kind of reevaluate their strategy with how they're going to reshape their rotation. And there's a lot of rumblings if you go on Twitter and if you go on Reddit and some of the other sites here with some speculation about, a deal that could be coming here down the road for the Sox on a trade. And, like I said, let's just hope that something does happen here. But to my earlier point there, I think they really are going to have to get creative and looking at how they go about reshaping this rotation here. And I think a trade would definitely be a viable way to go about doing it, in addition to maybe signing someone like Hyun-Jin Ryu or Keuchel.
We said it last year after the Machado thing didn't work. They were shell-shocked for the next 10 days to 2 weeks. There were other moves that could have been made to fine-tune their roster, and they couldn't figure out what to do next because their plan got blown out of the water, and it was like they went back to the drawing board on what they wanted to do. I feel like they put together a plan this year where they were like, okay, first we're going to go get Yasmani Grandal. Next, we're going to go get Zach Wheeler. And there were probably like 3 or 4 other steps. But when number 2 didn't work out, they had to put the brakes on. It's not like they had like plan A and plan B written out. When plan A didn't work, they have to sit down now and try to figure out what is plan B. Do you think that I'm crazy to think that?
I don't necessarily think that you're crazy. The way I'm kind of envisioning this scenario is, those mystery books that you read as a child that's, okay, you pick this direction. If you go down direction A, then it's going to lead to this. If you go down direction B, it's going to lead to this. I almost think it's kind of one of those scenarios. So they went down direction A, they got Yasmani Grandal like you talked about. Then they come to the next fork in the road. It's like, okay, do we get Zach Wheeler or do we not? And that decision is ultimately going to determine then the direction that they're going to go. So at least I'm hopeful that they had backup plans in mind that they're trying to execute on here in the coming days following the Zach Wheeler decision, because let me tell you, if they went into that thing and kind of put all of their eggs into that basket and didn't have a fallback option on it, man, does that speak very poorly as far as what this organizational thought process is. And I think it's difficult for us as fans to envision a worse thought process than we've already been accustomed to.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think that if we get to, let's say, Sox Fest, and I'm hearing them saying we did the best we could for Zach Wheeler, but when you go, well, what about Keuchel, or what about Ryu, or what about Bumgarner, and they just shrug, and you go, and what about Cole, or what about Strasburg, and like, I couldn't really afford it, and the only target was Wheeler, I think Sox fans are going to be enraged because there wasn't just one option out there that you could go get, and there wasn't just one option out there that you could afford to put up at the top end of your rotation, or at least in the 2 spot or the 3 spot of your rotation. There are plenty of guys that could be added, and I think that Sox fans now are on edge because they're worried, oh my goodness, was this it? Do they know what they're going to do next? What, are we just going to sit around now? I don't think that's the case, but that's the angst that I'm feeling.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment. We're almost at this point conditioned as a fan base to expect the worst. And, it really stinks to sit here and have to say that. But unfortunately, this organization has kind of put us into this mindset that we assume that they're not going to be able to execute on a strategic vision going into the following season. So it's really incumbent upon them to prove to us that they do have that plan and that they can execute on it.
Let's talk a little bit about some possible plans, okay? There's 3 pitchers out there that I think White Sox fans would say, in one way or another, they'd say, okay, I'll accept this. We didn't get Zach Wheeler, and I would have liked for them to be in on Garrett Cole or Steven Strasburg, but I will accept a Keuchel, I will accept a Ryu, I will accept a Madison Bumgarner. I think there are complaints for all 3 of them, and there are good things that you could bring up for all 3 of them. There will definitely be debate if they get any one of those 3. If you had to right now rank them 1 through 3 for this team, how would you do it?
If I had to, I think I would say Ryu, Keuchel, and then Bumgarner. And I know you're going to disagree with that. I know you and Dave are big Bumgarner guys. And to your point, there are warts on all 3 of these left-handed starting pitchers. The way I look at it, I think Ryu probably has the highest upside associated with these pitchers, just given the performance that we saw from him in 2019. But he's a guy that does have an injury history that is kind of extensive, the way Zach Wheeler's was, prior to the last 2 years. So there's obviously a concern with that, a guy coming over from the National League that's never pitched in the American League before. So, there's concerns with that. Keuchel, I think, has the lowest upside of the 3 pitchers, but he might have the highest floor. There's just really nothing sexy about Keuchel anymore at this point. He's a guy that doesn't really throw hard. He relies on a lot of cunning and guile from the left side, which is, kind of ironic because that's the type of pitcher that I was when I was a scrub in college. So you would think I would be a little more attracted to that, but nevertheless. And then, with Bumgarner, the amount of mileage that's on his arm and the fact that he's only 30 years old, and you just look at the number of innings that guy has thrown, it's really concerning to me from that standpoint as you look at, some of the decline in overall velocity, and some of his splits away from Oracle Park are really downright frightening. And you take him out of that hitter's environment in the National League where you oftentimes get anywhere from 2 to 4 almost guaranteed outs, given how bad 8 and 9 hitters are in the National League, especially with the pitcher spot. That's why I'm more bearish on Madison Bumgarner than a lot of people are. Unless he can just take a nap for the first 6 months of the season, Sox get to October, and then they can wake him up at that point.
Steve Parodzinski writes for Sox in the Basement. He also writes all over the place, like I said. Go find Southside Clown Show on Twitter at NWI Steve. We will talk off the air, my friend, I'm sure, before the holidays, but for the sake of everybody that's listening, you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and we will talk soon. And if something big happens and we want to talk about it, maybe we'll get you on before that.
Absolutely, Chris. Looking forward to it as always. Have yourself a Merry Christmas as well.
You have the White Sox fans who, they want to sign everybody. Like, they want JD Martinez, they want Garrett Cole and Steven Strasburg. They want this team to sign everybody. And like you said, if they don't, they suck. Right? Then you have this other camp, Chris, who literally wants the White Sox to sign nobody. You have this, and it's a lot of the older school camp who they're these guys who believe that, these baseball players are overpaid. Nah, there were guys on social media who were like, hey, 100 million for Wheeler. Nobody's worth that money. You need to build your own. No, it doesn't work that way either, boys and girls. Yes, you have to build your own. Absolutely. But you've got to augment it with free agents. There has to be some kind of balance. But it's really interesting to me how you get this camp of like people who want everybody and then people who want nobody.
I think the White Sox still end up with 2 pitchers and a right fielder. It just depends on whether or not they think the guys that they sign are worth 4 and 5 year contracts and big money, or if they think the guys that they sign are worth a couple of years as fill-ins because they are fine going out there, replacing one of them or doing an upgrade in 2021 or for 2022, especially with a collective bargaining agreement looming, a new one. So look, there's a lot of options that are out there, but I don't think that they're trying to be cheap, and I don't think they're trying to avoid going out and getting the right ball players. I just think that they're being very measured as to what they have. We talk about this all the time. We've talked about it before. Nick Hostetler was moved, and they won't come out and say it, but it's pretty obvious to most people surrounding the team, moved from his role with amateur scouting to being Rick Hahn's special assistant so he could sit there and actually scout these major league players and tell him this guy's going to get better, this guy's going to get worse. Their evaluations are different this year than they were in the years past because there's a new guy looking at these players and evaluating them, if you really think about it. And they may have different takes on players than what the mainstream thinks.
Well, thank God for that, because our major league, our pro scouting department for pretty much our whole lives has been awful, dude. Right. So, yeah, fine, good.
Like, if you're excited about the Hostetler thing, which we were, and the idea that we think that he's the fresh set of eyes that's on these guys and doing these things, and if you believe that, then you also have to trust the idea that they may be sitting there valuing different players differently than we are valuing players. And you almost kind of have to trust that he knows what he's doing. I mean, there's part of me that wants to trust that. I think Nick Hostetler's done some pretty smart things. You know, I think that his drafts have been better than most drafts before he got in there and started doing things. I think he's kind of started to figure out a lot of stuff. And I'm actually kind of happy with the fact that he's evaluating things. I'm happy that I'm seeing Hahn in the front instead of really hearing a lot from Kenny Williams. I mean, the only time you hear from Kenny Williams are those hanger-ons from the mainstream media that are like, man, if I just hang out with Kenny, maybe he'll buy me a meal I can talk about how great he is.
I talked to some folks this week, actually yesterday, when this whole Ozuna thing was going on. And the one thing that I found myself saying a bunch, and it speaks to what you're saying about how the Sox are playing it closer to the vest, is I told him, I was like, look, if we're hearing about this, it's probably not happening. Like, the moves that have happened with the White Sox this season and with other Chicago teams that have been successful, these are the moves that come out of nowhere, like the Yasmani Grandal. You know, when we talked about it, when we started hearing more about Wheeler, we both said, we're like, you know what, man, if this dude doesn't sign by Thanksgiving, he ain't coming to the White Sox. And sure enough, he didn't sign by Thanksgiving, and somebody swooped in at the last minute and got him. So I like the fact,
and that's why I said that.
I like the fact that I can sit here and say, you know what? If you're not here, you know, if you're hearing about this move, it's probably not going to happen. It's the moves that you don't hear about that are going to happen, and the ones that you want to happen.
Look, I'm happy with what they're doing so far. I'm glad they're keeping their mouths shut. It does not bother me that information is not being leaked like crazy. I do refresh my Twitter page every 15 seconds because I'm hoping for something, but in reality, it'll just be, we know that the thing we're waiting for is Jeff Passan to sit there and say, the White Sox have signed so-and-so, or Ken Rosenthal to sit there and say, the White Sox have signed so-and-so. And that's all I'm waiting for. Those are the only two people I'm really paying attention to. I get excited about the Ozuna thing because it's fun. It's fun to get excited about the Ozuna thing, but it didn't happen.
Is it though? Is it that fun?
I find it fun.
I don't know, man.
I find it intriguing. I love it.
When that kind of stuff happens, I'm just like, here we go again.
I love it. It's intriguing to me. The idea that, like, they could be doing this, and then you start sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, what would be their lineup? You know what the first thing I thought of with the Ozuna thing when it was coming out?
Was that?
I was like, oh, now think of this. Like, everybody's sitting around saying that, like, he'd be terrible in the outfield, which is stupid because look at how terrible all of our right fielders have been defensively over the years.
God.
Now, all of a sudden, you want a defensive specialist out there that also hits 30 home runs? I mean, how much crack are you smoking, White Sox fans? There aren't a lot of those guys out there.
No, they're not there.
You know what I want? I want a left-handed power hitter that gets me 35 home runs and can throw out a guy from the outfield corner to third base on the one hop, okay, makes diving plays and is going to do it for the money that Jerry Reinsdorf will pay him. I mean, like, come on.
Well,
you're never going to be happy.
Can we get Griffey Jr. out of retirement? He can do that.
You're never going to be happy if that's what you want. But you know what? The first thing I thought of is I was like, man, wouldn't that be interesting? Like, you know what would be kind of a neat move is like you get Ozuna, right? And then you go out and you like make a deal and you trade somebody like Zach Collins to the Pirates for Starling Marte, and you throw in like another prospect, and then you put Marte in right, and you make Ozuna the DH, and you can have Ozuna and Jimenez switch back and forth from DH to the outfield. And all of a sudden you like change directions and fool everybody. And you have like this just murderer's row like starting to be created in the middle of your lineup. You know, I mean, like those are the ideas that you don't even think of unless you see that rumor. So I kind of enjoy like the fun of it. I like playing GM. This is why I play fantasy baseball. I like playing GM. It's fun to do. I would love to work for a professional baseball team. They would never have me. I'd be there for 2 weeks and I'd be like, who is this moron? He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. They'd be like, that's the president of baseball operations. And I'd be out.
Well, that's, the only certain teams, Chris. You could probably get a job with a team like the Red Sox or the Dodgers who are highly into sabermetrics and who think outside the box. I'd be like, you know
what we should do? We should do this. And somebody would be like, well, that's not how we do things. And the owner doesn't have that kind of money. And I'd just be like, what? And they'd fire me the next day. So I couldn't be in there. I couldn't. Okay. But I mean, I enjoy this. This is fun. I don't mind the Ozuna rumor if, it doesn't come true. It doesn't bother me. I'm happy with the fact they tried for Wheeler and they didn't get him. They did the best that they possibly could. I just don't see where the angst is right now with White Sox fans. It is the middle of December. We're the first people to start screaming about the team when the team sucks. I'm not angry with them.
No.
Are you angry with them?
No.
Okay, if Dave is not angry with them, what is wrong with you?
There are so many more people out there that are angrier than me. You have no idea, dude. Just spend some time on White Sox social media and you will see. It's pretty appalling, actually. I've said this before. I come down here when the White Sox do good things, I say good things about them.
Right.
When the White Sox do stupid things, I tell them that they're saying and doing stupid things.
No, I intend to enjoy my holidays and watch hot stove stuff. And then when the first of the year comes around and nothing's happened, then I'll start increasing my anger.
Yeah.
Right now I just want to kind of evaluate what they can do, what they should do, what's available out there, and talk about the intriguing possibilities, because that's what the fun of this is. We're going to talk about far more players than the Sox are actually going to sign, or that are even available.
Right, because that's just how you do this.
But that's what makes this fun. Stop getting so angry about it. That's my only advice to everybody. All right? It's the holidays. Listen to some Frank Sinatra sing Jingle Bells.
No, it's Mariah Carey now. That's what everybody listens to.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.